koha-US
I don't know if everybody can hear me.
and I work at the Latah County Library District.
I can hear you.
Okay, Lisette said that she crashed and she's bringing up a new instance, so she'll work on getting us connected here.
Okay.
Cool. My wife's working from home and she's just eating up as much bandwidth as I am. So I'm watching mine just constantly spin too. I'm gonna have to do something about this service.
I'm using my hotspot just in case I live in apartments. So, you know, everyone's home.
Yeah. Oh, you know, she's got her phone, she's got her iMac, she's got her Mac going, she's talking on everything. I've got eating up as much bandwidth as I am, so I'm watching mine just constantly spin. Okay. Let's share that. As much bandwidth as I am, so I'm watching mine just constantly spin. Looks like we made it. Looks like we made it back. Okay. Share. Doing it right now. As much bandwidth as I am, so I'm watching mine just constantly spin.
Oh, it's very confusing to see the slightly delayed version of my own video there. If I can position this where I can see the chat and not the video. Yeah.
Good.
Sorry, my cat woke up.
Ah.
Oh, come here, kitty. Be famous. You're streaming on the internet. Good work. That's Robin.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, real.
I think it did that the other day when you crashed too. It left the stream going. I had to go in and cancel it. So
YouTube, the feed. I wonder how this is going to come across on YouTube. It's not, there's quite a delay. Probably about 20, 30-second delay. We've got 15 back. Should we go ahead and say hi? And all right. Well, hi again, everybody. We are back, and sorry we had a little technical difficulty. I think as we're all experiencing, there's a lot of usage that's going on right now. So there's probably folks at home that are doing a lot of streaming right now. It's the end of the day on the East Coast, and who knows how that's affecting us. But anyways, we've got two presenters up right now. We're all anxious to hear from. We've got Rocio and Andrew, and again, they're going to be talking about importing your patrons on the first try. Take it away, guys.
So I need to share my screen. Can y'all see that okay? You can, Andrew?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. I don't know if it's showing it up in the video, so I'll just keep going. Please stop me if I need to try something different. I also realize that if I scroll too fast, the presentation goes all the way to the end. So I'm going to try to only click, and I apologize if I totally mess that up. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Patron Imports because we work with school and academic libraries that are going to be importing patrons or faculty members or staff after they've gone live using files that they get from their registrar or from their IT departments. So this is something that we've built into our migration process. And when we do get these files, there's a standard set of steps and things that we look for to make sure that the file looks okay and that it'll work. And once we've gotten the file ready, we send it back to our staff members there so that they can see what the file needs to look like and they can test on their end. The goal is typically that the file will be able to be imported through an automatic patron import, or that the staff could turn around and use the built-in import tool in Koha. So we just want to make sure that the file is going to work for them and that they're okay and comfortable using the tool. So it's just something that we're fairly familiar with at this point. I want to start off by mentioning the manual because it's a really solid resource for a how-to on doing these patron imports. So the manual will show you at the beginning what the formatting for this file needs to look like. And then it will go into the steps and guide you using also some screenshots. So I think it's a really amazing tool, and you might even want to pull that up and leave it open in another screen or somewhere on your computer as you're testing patron imports. You can also access a starter CSV from directly within the staff client. So if you do have access to the tools, you can go ahead and click on the home page of your staff client, click on tools, and then click on import patrons, and you'll be taken to that import patrons tool. On that screen on the right-hand side, you'll see some basic instructions for a successful patron import. So if there are a couple of things that you're not sure about or have forgotten about, that's a nice cheat sheet to have right on the page. I found the starter CSV file to be a little bit confusing to find. So this snip right here shows that the starter CSV is on the second line of those notes. If you click on the word here, then that will start an automatic download of that CSV file. The file that you use ultimately needs to be encoded in UTF-8 format. I'm familiar with using LibreOffice, so I know that's an option that I have when I'm using that software and I'm saving the file there. That might be something that you can poke around and find in your software as well. So when we crack open a patron file to begin with, one of the first things that we're looking for is a card number field. And we want to make sure that each patron has a card number in that field. That's just a standard for the libraries we're working with. And we want to make sure that each one has one because it's typically our match point. We then look for a surname because that's a mandatory field. You might have some rows or patrons in your patron file where the patron is actually a library or an organization. So in those cases, you might consider putting that patron's full name into the surname just to meet that requirement. The branch code and category code are fields that we also typically have in these files. When you are putting in data into those columns, we need to use the codes for the branch codes and category codes and not the descriptions. So here, if we were to be importing a patron file for a library that has these sample codes, we would be using STU in the category code column and then W in the branch code column. You might have some distinct required fields that your library has set in your system preferences. So to see the fields that are required on a patron import, you can hop over to borrower mandatory fields in your system preferences. It's a little bit of flexibility in those patron imports. So some libraries put more and some libraries take most of that out in the system preference. This next slide is really important to me because we have had to restore some patron data for our partners because of blank columns. So we just caution anybody that's doing patron imports to make sure that they've removed blank columns from their file. Blank columns are not ignored. One might think that, okay, the tool's smart enough to know if I'm not bringing data in this column, I just want to ignore it altogether. But that's not the case. Koha's going to read your blank column, and when you're pulling in that patron record, you're going to overwrite your patrons with blank data if they had existing data in those fields. So that's a huge caution. I hope somebody out here is benefiting from that because I really was surprised when we started to test out imports and found that that was the case. When we're looking for date fields in the patron files, we generally gravitate toward using a year, month, date format because that's the default. But you can go ahead and use the default that you've set in your date format system preference. So as you're requesting these files from your IT department or pulling them from another system, you could go ahead and already set the dates to reflect what you're using in the preference. A caution about this preference, I would read carefully the description of this preference if you've already gone live and been live for a while before you decide to change it. So that's about as much as I know. I personally haven't changed it, but I wanted to mention that because as I was reviewing the description, it seemed pretty serious. Column names are also really important. So the column names that you use in your patron file need to match the existing field names that we have in the borrower's table. And this is where that starter CSV file might come in handy if you want to see what the names need to be or you want something pre-written that you can just fill out. This is a link to the schema for the borrower's table. If you happen to want to know what the fields can contain or what they're used for, this is a great resource for seeing all of those fields listed. And this link in particular is referencing the 1905 borrower schema. So once we've ensured that the file looks good, then we move on to doing an actual test import. On the import patron screen, You'll select the file that you want to import by clicking on Choose File. And below that, you can select to create patron list. This is something I just found out about as I was testing with some other Bywater team members, and I'm really excited about it. So what Create Patron List does is, while you are doing an import, it will gather the patrons that you've newly created as a result of this import and chunk them into a list for you that you can review when you're done. So I'll show that example a little bit toward the end. After the selection here, Create Patron List, then we move on to selecting what we want to use as our match point. When we are bringing in patrons, we have the option to overlay them. And based on the selection that we make here, we'll be choosing how we want to match up the patrons in the file against those that we already have in the database. The default selections for this are card number and username. You can also create unique patron attributes in your system. If you do that, when you've set those attributes to be unique, those are then available also as match points. I'll talk a little bit more about what patron attributes are. This next section is collapsed by default. So if I were to click on that plus sign, I would get a list of all of the available borrowers fields that are in the database. And we don't typically use that when we're doing tests for our libraries in migration. We find that the data that they're bringing in is really the data that we need. But if you are doing an import where you might want to apply a branch code to all of the patrons or apply a category code to all of the patrons, you might find this useful. In our case, the patrons are typically all in just one giant file. We don't get them separated out by type, so we don't generally use it, but here you could even enter some common note for all the patrons you're bringing in. And then following that is where we choose what we want to happen when a match is found. So above where we selected what we want to use as our match point, that's then used here later on to determine what happens when there is a match between the file and the database. If I were to choose the first option to ignore this one and keep the existing one, I'm telling the tool that I don't care to retain any of the data in the file I'm bringing in. I want to keep the patron that's in the database as is. If I select to overwrite, then based on that match point, I'm going to be overlaying the data that's in my file onto the existing patron. So the last section that we have in the patron import screen is about these patron attributes. Just to give a quick summary of what these patron attributes are, we do create them a lot during migrations because they're very flexible. You can create patron attributes fields to store any sort of legacy data you want to keep or any additional borrower information that doesn't have an existing borrower's fields in the main patron table. So we can also set them to be unique. We can set them to be tied to lists of authorized values. They're very, very flexible. That link up there to the manual will take you to a really nice page about the patron attributes. And again, it's going to take you to the latest version of that patron attributes page. To get to patron attributes that you might have set already in your staff client, you can click on Koha administration from your home page and then click on patron attribute types. So there you should see a list of all the attributes that your system has already set before you do the import. I would say that this section of the import tool can be a little bit difficult to understand. So if you select to replace all patron attributes, you are going to be replacing every patron attribute in the database with what you're bringing in your file. That might not be the best option if you do have existing attributes that you want to keep. The second option replace only included patron attributes is going to overlay the existing attributes with what you're bringing in and leave anything else as is. If you are going to bring in patron attributes, you're going to need to use the code. So this is where you'll want to reference the patron attributes that you've already set in your system there in Koha administration. And I'll show you all an example of what that looks like. So this is a very simplified example of a patron file here. My column headers are set accurately. They match existing fields. And that's where we see that the patron attributes column has a little bit of a funky formatting requirement. If I'm bringing in patron attributes, I need to prefix them with the code of the attribute field that I want to populate. Here in my example, because I have two, I'm separating them with a comma. The screenshot up at the top with test and test 2. So these are some sample codes that I had set in the staff client. When I look at a patron record, I'm not seeing the code. I'm seeing dummy field for testing or dummy field for testing 2. But when I'm bringing them in, I'm going to need to actually use the codes in the field. One of the things we like to do when we're doing patron imports is to put up maybe a couple of patrons that we know are going to be overlaid, run the import, and then refresh that patron screen just to see how the patron's record has changed. So that might be something that y'all enjoy doing as well. It's a nice check to make sure that the file was formatted correctly and that the overlay worked. So in the following screen here, I can see the result of my import of just that one line. This is a character from one of my favorite books in the whole world, or favorite set of books. So I can see here that I imported one new patron, 0 were overwritten because none existed with that matching card number. There was only one record in my file. And then at the bottom of the page, I'm going to see feedback about the file itself that I imported. Before I go on to the next slide, I know we geared this talk toward not making any mistakes and importing the best file ever, but the truth is that errors are going to happen and they're very normal. They're very typical when we work with these files to begin with, and I love the built-in error reporting in this tool. So if you do happen to get errors, that's nothing to be discouraged about. You will be able to use the feedback to go locate the patrons that gave you an error, fix them, and then try the import again. So I created a dummy patron entry in that same file. Second to Harry, I put in Hagrid. I didn't give Hagrid a surname. So when I tried to import this file, I said I didn't want to overwrite any existing patrons, but I did want to go ahead and import new ones. But I wasn't able to import Hagrid because the surname field was missing. Thankfully, if I go to the bottom of the page, I'm told exactly which line that error occurred on and why I got the error. So if I still have the file handy, I can open it back up, give Hagrid a surname, and then try the import again, and he will be imported to the staff client. Once I've done this import, this is where I can hop over to patron lists. And again, I'm so excited about these because patron lists are going to show me which patrons were newly created as a result of my specific import. So on that import patron screen on the left-hand side, I can click on patron lists and go over to see all of the existing lists that I've created, including this new one. I had an existing list already in the site, and below it, I can see the name of my file, the date, and it's a clickable link into that list. When I click into it, I can see that I created Harry. So I could click on Harry's card number there. I could go check his record to make sure that everything has come over smoothly. And I find it to be a really nice checkpoint during these imports. There are other uses for patron lists, but I've only really tested them out during these patron imports. I'm not sure what other functions they have, but this part I'm particularly really excited about, if only that it can prove that the import worked for me.
Well, and from here, you can then take that list and use it in either a batch patron modification, if maybe something was wrong in all of these files that you brought in, or to go straight into a batch patron delete if your import went really poorly and you want to basically undo it and try it over again. So that's to me, the best thing is it makes it real easy to just take those patrons out and then replace them.
That's amazing. Thank you, Andrew. And that's about it, y'all. That was all I wanted to share with you. I went over this with the migration team because I really wanted to make sure that I represented things that we're used to doing and we've kind of committed to muscle memory, quote unquote. So hopefully this is helpful. Are there any questions?
I'm just curious.
Go ahead, Todd.
I was going to say, I was just curious if that was Andrew's cat playing the piano.
Hey. My niece. We are on, like a 15 to 20 second delay into the stream. So.
Oh, okay.
Vamp a little in case there are questions.
And I'm not seeing any coming in. I know that Lisette was interested in having a poll to find out. She thinks that her internet is what's causing some of the problem, besides maybe a lot of people being at home and being online. So I think she wants to see if having Jason go ahead and stream this is a better fit. So we'll just wait for her. Were you at the end of your presentation, Marcia?
Mm-hmm.
Very nice, thank you.
Hello.
Hey, Ed. So, yeah, there is an interesting delay when I look back at the YouTube and I feel like I'm a Muppet. Let me see if I can get Lisette and we'll see about what poll she wants to do. She was interested in seeing if Jason wanted to take this over.
Well, then goodbye, everybody.
See you guys. Thank you very much. Great presentation. Thanks. Thanks for seeing. I think did we just lose the?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Ed. Young Kelly, sorry, everybody went away. I don't know if Lisette is making a change. Lisette, can you hear me? She said she was having internet problems, Ed, and that she was thinking about switching over to Jason and having him stream. Yeah, I can hear you. How would you like to do this? So Lisette, do you want everybody to know where to find the link? Where do we want to post it? Okay. Good. Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Kelly, thanks for your patience.
It seems to only have been this last part where things have gotten choppy.
Okay, I scheduled. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I scheduled one. So that here's the link. I'll put it in the chat, and then I'll get it started. I think everybody can hear us too. So hi everybody.